Good evening and good Erev Shabbos, everybody. This coming Shabbos, we are going to be reading Parshas Naso, which of course has the distinction of being the longest Parsha in the Torah, and so therefore there's a lot to discuss. But what I would like to do this evening is focus on one mitzvah in Parshas Naso, a mitzvah that we are quite familiar with, at least in terms of the way that we do it today. And what I would like to talk about is the mitzvah of Birchas Kohanim. The Torah tells us at the end of the fourth Aliyah, which is at the conclusion of the sixth chapter of Sefer Bamidbar, that the Kohanim in the Mikdash are supposed to bless the people. Kos v'archu es b'nei Yisrael, amor lahem, and the Torah goes on to tell us the exact brachos. The bracha, which is Meshuleshes Batorah, three brachos, Yivarechacho Hashem, Yishmarecho, Yo'er, Yisa. These are the brachos that were iterated by the Kohanim each and every day in the Mikdash as part of the service of the Karban Tamid. We know that today in Eretz Yisrael, Kohanim duchen every day. In Chutz La'aretz, we only do so on Yom Tif. But when we do so today, it is not an actual fulfillment of the real mitzvah Birchas Kohanim, which happened in the Mikdash and was an entirely different experience. Now, what we call Birchas Kohanim, there's another term that we use to describe the process of when the Kohanim go up and they stand on a platform on the Duchen and they bless the people. We call that Nesias Kapayim. And the reason we call it Nesias Kapayim is because the Kohanim raise their hands. They raise their hands as part of the delivery of the bracha. Now, why do they do so? So that actually is not found in this week's parsha, but the Gemara in Sota tells us that it is based on a pasuk that is found in Parsha Shmini, where the Torah tells us that when Aaron HaKohen delivered a bracha on the day of dedication, the day in which the Mishkan was inaugurated, Aaron gave a bracha to the people, and over there it says, "Vayisa Aaron es yadav ala am vayivarchem." Aaron lifted his hands, and he gave the people a bracha, and the Gemara teaches that from here we see that every time the Kohanim give a bracha to the people, they are supposed to raise their hands. But as often, we are curious, and we would like to probe a little bit beneath the surface, and we're going to ask why. Why is it that the Torah instructs the Kohanim to lift their hands, to raise their hands, to essentially use a physical position through the Nesias Kapayim to deliver a spiritual bracha? So one way that this is often explained is that the Kohanim, by raising their hands, are symbolically demonstrating that their hands are clean, that they are, after all, Niki Chapayim, that their hands are clean of immorality, of corruption. If the Kohanim are going to serve as a conduit through which HaKadosh Baruch Hu will bless his people, says the pasuk, so they have to be able to raise their hands and show, look, my hands are clean, that I myself am roy, I am fitting to be able to serve as a conduit for Hashem's bracha. There's a halacha that a Kohen who has a physical mum, that there is some defect, an actual blemish on his hand, may not perform the duchen, may not involve himself in the mitzvah Birchas Kohanim. And even if there is paint on his hand, something which is merely just covering his hand, which could be removed with soap and water, this is also something which would be a psul. Now, we could suggest as well that this is symbolic, because an actual physical mum could, on a certain level, be representative of a spiritual defect, of a spiritual mum. And if paint is something which covers one's skin, and so therefore you cannot see what's beneath it, in this sense, the paint could be understood metaphorically as something that the Kohen is doing to cover for his imperfections. If the Kohen is in fact not Niki Chapayim, not clean hand, but perhaps his covering is doing something to conceal his faults, so he himself is not able to perform this mitzvah. Rav Avram Kelman offers a very, very beautiful suggestion, as based on this, as to why it is that we are not supposed to look at the Kohanim at the time of Birchas Kohanim, specifically their hands. We know that the Gemara in Maseches Chagiga tells us that we are forbidden to look at the hands of the Kohanim as they bless the people. The Kohanim in the Mikdash would bless the people using the Shem HaMefurash. They use the actual name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and Rashi explains over there that the Shechina would reside upon their hands. And so therefore, because of the incredible moment of Kedusha, so therefore we would not look at the Kohanim at this time. But Rav Kelman explains, in light of the symbolism that we are suggesting, that the Kohanim by raising their hands, are basically saying, look, we are clean. So we could suggest perhaps a deeper understanding of this halacha. Although the Kohanim are required to go ahead and to do a sincere cheshbon nefesh, a Kohen has to look at himself and look at his hands and say, look, I am clean. I have done all I can to rid myself of immorality, of corruption, of dishonesty. Just as that's incumbent upon the Kohen, it is equally incumbent upon each and every one of us, those who are standing and receiving that bracha, not to look at the Kohanim. Meaning it is not at our place to judge them with scrutiny. It is not our place to rigorously look at their hands and to examine their hands and to see whether or not it is free of all blemish and filth. Rather, this is the responsibility of the Kohen, and it is not the responsibility of the people. When the Shekhinah and the presence of the Shekhinah is there at the time of the Berachos Kohanim, hopefully this will motivate and inspire the Kohanim to do a sincere cheshbon nefesh, if necessary, to do tshuva and to cleanse their hands so that they are indeed sincerely and genuinely niki chapayim. But we have to respect that is for them to do. And we are not going to examine them. We are not going to judge them. We are not going to look at them and say, so, nu, let me see your hands and see whether you are roy for this job. The truth of the matter is, this message is something that hopefully each and every one of us could relate to, even outside of the context of Birchos Kohanim. Each and every one of us has a responsibility, a sacred responsibility, to see to it that our hands are clean. And I mean, not only in the literal physical sense, although that's a good idea as well, but more importantly, spiritually, to make sure that our hands are clean of corruption, that our hands are clean of dishonesty, and that we are acting in a faithful, in an honest, in an ehrliche way. But at the same time, we have to resist the temptation that we sometimes have to look at other people's hands. When we see other people raise their hands and say, look, we are clean, we should turn away. And we should not look, and we should not study, and we should not examine and say, wait a second, I see a mum over there. And wait a second, I see some paint over there. There's something that you are doing to conceal, to cover your mumin. It is not our place to judge other people. People need to judge themselves. We need to look as favorably, as generously as possible. As Chazal tell us, Havidanis kol adam lekaf schus. I want to share with you at this time a story that comes to mind. Rav Mordechai Druk in the Sefer Darash Mordechai records an incredible story. This is actually found in Parshas Korach, a different parsha, but it's an incredible, incredible story that I'd like to share with you because it comes to mind as I say over this beautiful word that I just shared with you. Rav Druk tells a story that happened in Yerushalayim many years ago, where there was a certain individual who was not a wealthy person, but he spent many, many years saving all he could so that if and when he would be able to retire and be able to stop working, he would be able to support his family for as long as needed. And in those days, they didn't have banks. So if you wanted to save up money, so you did so in the form of an expensive coin. And he had a gold Napoleon, which was worth at the time about a year's living expenses. And so therefore, this individual had one prized jewel, as it was, which he took very, very good care of. He kept it in a very safe place. And no one other than the people in his family knew where it was. Every once in a while, he would take it down and he would polish it and he would look at it and he would put it back. One day, this man was out. He was not home. And he had a young boy in the house, 5 or 6 years old, his youngest son, who decided that he was hungry and he wanted to go to the store to buy a candy. And so therefore, he climbed to the top of the closet and he takes this very, very expensive coin, this gold Napoleon, and he decides that he's going to go to the store and buy himself a treat. Now his father comes home a little later and he notices that the door is open and he takes a look and lo and behold, he discovers that the coin is missing. He is completely beside himself. He is shocked. He cannot believe what happened. And he's looking this way, that way, and he calls his son. And he said to him, did you climb up to get that coin? And the child admitted that, in fact, he did. And the father said, what'd you do with it? And he says, well, I was hungry, so I went to the store. So the father immediately ran out and he goes to the store and he goes to the storekeeper and he says, where's that coin that my son brought you? He said, what coin? He said, he was here earlier today. He brought a candy. I know he paid you with a coin. He said, yeah, it was some simple little bronze coin. I don't know what it is. He says, don't lie. It wasn't a bronze coin. He gave you a gold Napoleon. And the grocer said, a gold Napoleon? He gave me a copper coin. It was cheap. It was nothing. And the father said to him, you're lying. And the merchant said, I don't know what to tell you. I never saw such a coin. And so therefore they went to Bezdin, and there was a whole tumult in Bezdin. And the Bezdin said to the grocer, is it true? Did you receive a coin? He said, yes, I received the coin, but it wasn't that coin. And so therefore he was essentially a modeh b'miktsas. He acknowledged part of the claim, but not the entire claim. And he had no choice, but in order to defend his position, he was required to take a shvuah. He had to swear that he was not lying. And so therefore he took a shvuah, and he absolutely denied this claim, this charge, this allegation that he stole a gold Napoleon. But the truth of the matter is, even though he may have won in court, he lost in the court of public opinion. Rumors were going around town. Everybody heard this story, and people could not believe it, that this grocer would have the chutzpah, the gall, to go ahead and to take this coin and then to deny it, to become rich at somebody else's expense. And slowly but surely, people stopped going, and they stopped shopping in this guy's store, and he had no choice, but he had to close his business, and he basically became a very, very poor and miserable and broken tzebrachin man. Sometime later, I don't know if it was a year or two later, the person who was the original owner of the gold Napoleon is home one day, and he gets a knock on the door. And there's a man who comes, and he says, I have a terrible confession that I need to make. He said, some time ago, I was very, very desperate. My wife and my family had nothing to eat. They were literally starving. And I saw your son walking with a golden Napoleon. And the first thing I thought to myself was, maybe I should just take it from him because he's going to lose it. I wouldn't want him to lose it, and I'll bring it back to the owner. But then I saw it, and I said to myself, maybe this is a sign from God. Maybe I should just take it and use it so that I can help my family. And then at the right time, after I'm done borrowing it, I will come back and I will return it to the proper owner. And here I am, many, many, many months later. I'm so sorry that I took it from you all this time, but it really did save my family's life. And I apologize for this terrible deed that I did. And he went to return the coin. So that's the end of the first part of the story. Says Rav Druk, and here's the part that I ask you all to listen to. He said, we now know what happened. We know the end of the story. So he says, in Shemayim, who is truly held accountable for what happened here? This was a terrible travesty of sorts. Lives were ruined. Whose fault was it? Was it the owner of the golden Napoleon? Well, he did nothing wrong. He argued in Bezdin what he thought was true. Was it the grocer? Well, certainly not. He was perfectly honest. He was the victim here. He definitely did nothing wrong. What about the person who took the coin? So there's no question about it. What he did was wrong. He justified it by saying that he borrowed it. But after all, he did so because his family was starving. And he eventually paid it back. And he did tshuva. So says Rav Druk, so who then is truly held accountable? And he said, you know what the answer is? All the people in the town who made such a tumult over a machlokes that had nothing to do with them. It was none of their business. People who thought that they knew better and were so self-righteous, looking and studying the hands of other people and getting themselves involved in machlokes that had nothing to do with them. And unfortunately, we see this so often, that people study the hands of others too closely with scrutiny, and they examine to see what imperfections we can find on other people. And the message, perhaps, of the mitzvah Birchos Kohanim, the way it's performed, with the Kohen doing Nesiyas Kapayim, lifting his hand and saying, look, I'm trying my best. I'm trying my best to live a life as an Neki Kapayim. I'm trying to live my life as a person with clean hands. But at the same time, the Torah redirects each and every one of us to resist that natural impulse that we have. Don't stare. Don't look. Don't look at the hands of another person. Don't involve yourself in a dispute. Don't involve yourself in some issue that is not your problem and it's not your business. What an incredible message. What a timeless message that each and every one of us could learn from this mitzvah of Birchos Kohanim. So the next time, for those of us who live in Eretz Yisrael, who have the opportunity to participate in some shape or form in Birchos Kohanim on a regular basis, so this is something you can think about more often. For those of us who are in Chutz La'aretz, unfortunately, we don't get to hear Birchas Kohanim each and every day, but certainly we recite the Birchas Kohanim each and every day. It makes appearances in several different places in our davening, and so therefore this gives us a wonderful opportunity to reflect upon this incredible idea that each and every one of us should try our best to make sure that our hands are as clean as could be, but at the same time, don't look at the hands of another. Thank you, and have a wonderful Shabbos.